Hi all. So today let us discuss about right against exploitation. As you all know that fundamental rights is an important right which is guaranteed by the Constitution of India. It is one of the salient features of the Indian Constitution. So in fundamental right against exploitation is very important because exploitation was happening in India, and in some parts it is still happening in India. So in order to fight against exploitation, we have a constitutional provision called as right against exploitation. So part 3 of the Constitution is dealing with fundamental rights. In part 3 of the Constitution, we have articles 23 to 24 which is dealing with the right against exploitation. Article 23 to 24 is dealing with right against exploitation. So what is Article 23? Article 23 prohibits traffic in human beings, beggar and other forms of forced labor. Very important. It prohibits traffic in human beings, beggar and other forms of forced labor. Article 24, which prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 years in any factory or other hazardous activities like construction or railways. So very important thing to understand. The prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 years in any factory or other hazardous activities like construction or railways. So some of the detailed explanation regarding Article 23, prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor. Traffic in human beings include selling and buying of men, women and children like goods. It should not happen in a society. Selling and buying of men, because these are not commodities. Men, women and children are not commodities, so they cannot be sold like goods. So it is against that. Immoral traffic in women, children, including prostitution, devadasis and slavery. So these are certain customs which are practiced in India, which is a form of exploitation, which was a form of exploitation or a discrimination. So it should not happen. Immoral traffic in women, children, including prostitution and devadasis and slavery should not be happening. So this is the main meaning of traffic in human beings. Then to punish these acts, Parliament has made Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 13, 1956. So very important, because it is not only through Constitution we are dealing, it is through the Constitution, as we are taking Constitution as the base, and from that we are actually framing rules and regulations or the policies and the laws to actually safeguard the people from exploitation. The term beggar means compulsory work without remuneration. So that is also prohibited in India. It is also considered as a exploitation. Then what is Article 24? Article 24, prohibition of employment of children in factories. Article 24 prohibits the employment of children below age 14 years in any factory, mine or hazardous activities like construction work or railway. So what are the major legislation happened in that area? We can see that the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986, Employment of Children Act of 1938, Factories Act of 1948, Mines Act of 1952, Merchant Shipping Act of 1958, Plantation Labor Act of 1951, Motor Transport Workers Act of 1951, Apprentices Act of 1961, BD and Cigar Workers Act of 1966. All these legislations are dealing with child labor. It is not completely dealing with child labor, but in all these legislations we can see some aspects are mentioned about against child labor, or some guidelines are actually given to the people, or given to the people who are actually involving in these activities on the exploitation or against the exploitation. So the child labor part is mentioned in almost all these legislation. So here we can see that the government is actually actively participating in legislations or actively participating in rule making and policies to curtail the problem of child labor in India. So very important. Some of these things are very important. You can actually remember this when you're actually writing the examinations. You can remember these things. Then Child Labor Amendment Act 2016. The Child Labor Amendment Act and Regulation Amendment Act 2016 amended the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986. It has renamed the Principal Act as the Child and Adolescent Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986. So see, we knew that the Indian Constitution came into being in 1950, and after that many amendments happened in the Constitution. But see, when time changes, the lifestyle of the people changes, the situation changes, the environment changes, so everything changes. So based on the changes, the legislations also change. So that is why we can see that some of these legislations or rules and regulations are amended towards a later period to inculcate the changes happening in the society. So very important to note that the government is, or the administration is, taking care of the people. Administration is taking enough steps to protect people from exploitation. So a famous quote: "You educate a man, you educate a man. You educate a woman, you educate a generation." So hope you have understood the session regarding right against exploitation. It's an important part of the fundamental rights. So hope you have understood that. Thank you.